Welcome to the Special Education Essentials for Parents and Families podcast with your host, David Tollner. In each episode, we'll have guests who are professionals in the special education and disability services industry who support children with special needs. The law is complex, and this podcast does not cover all situations, legal responsibilities, or variations in different circumstances. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only, and nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the firm. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace legal advice. You can find this show on all the major platforms including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, TollnerLawOffices.com. Now, here's the host of Special Education Essentials for Parents and Families, David Tollner.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Special Education Essentials. I am your host, David Tollner, and I am very pleased to invite on the show and welcome Lisa O'Hearn-Keck, the Dean of Students at Palo Alto Prep School. Welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks, David.
To the listeners out there, I wanted to say this before we get into Palo Alto Prep and Lisa, and that is, if you haven't seen the first three episodes of this podcast, I invite you to go back and listen to them. That is really at the core of the message I'm trying to get out, right? Which is how to make your child's IEP more effective, right? How to put a better IEP in place so your child makes better progress in public school, right? That's the whole point of this podcast. And I want you to go back and listen to that, because part of the podcast talks about looking into your community, right? Going out, seeing what's out there that may be a better fit for your child from an educational perspective than the public school that they're going to. Because the law says this: if the public school does not drive meaningful progress in accordance with the circumstances of your student, your child, then the district has to do that, right? They have to drive meaningful progress. And if they can't do it, then perhaps there's a specialty school in your area that can. And you always want to know what's out there so you can take advantage of that option if you need to, right? If your child's not doing well in public school. And so it's with that background that we invite Lisa to the show, because she happens to run and started, and I can't wait to get the backstory on Palo Alto Prep, Lisa. But so she has a 60-student school in Northern California, in Mountain View, and it used to be in Palo Alto, and now it's been in Mountain View for quite a few years. And it's a place that I love to send kids because they do very well there, right? That's part of what I do for a living, is when districts do not drive meaningful progress, I look for schools that do. And Palo Alto Prep is one of those schools that does it very, very well for my clients and for many other students that are there. So with that said, that's the framework upon which we've invited Lisa and how she fits into the overall message of how to create a better IEP for your child. And with that, Lisa, welcome again. How are things going at Palo Alto Prep these days?
They're going good. I know, David, I can't believe, I think I've known you 20 years. Holy cow.
Yeah, I think that dovetails perfectly with the start of my practice.
Palo Alto Prep was in Palo Alto until we couldn't find real estate in Palo Alto, so we moved just over the border. But Palo Alto Prep actually was founded 40 years ago by my husband, Chris Keck, and it was based upon experiential learning. He used to take students out for 3 weeks out in the Sierras, and basically it was Mother Nature being the best teacher, kind of the predecessor to what our current day wilderness programs are. taking them away. In those days, there were no screens, there were no social media. But, actually in those days, kids were doing more drugs than they do these days. And so taking them out of the home, taking them away, and really, getting them down to their roots, so to speak. We don't do that quite as severely anymore, but really we believe that Mother Nature, experiential learning, hands-on learning is really the best way to go. Taking kids away from their screens, away from social media, away from their computers, away from their video games, and getting them out to do fun things, rafting, climbing, hiking, stained glass, all sorts of different kinds of things. But anyway, let me go back. So Palo Alto Prep was founded 40 years ago. We look at ourselves, though, as a 40-year startup. We are constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. Our population has evolved and changed through the years. But the thing that's always kind of been a unifying force at Palo Alto Prep, and what sets us apart, I think, is that the students here feel seen and known. And we meet them right where they need us in order to instill a spark. With that said, we're a non-public school. We're also a private school. We're a combination of both, which is kind of an odd thing. No one knows what to do with us. We're also a college prep school and a college prep high school, although we do take 8th graders. Most of the time when 8th graders come to us, it's social emotional. They've been bullied. They're having a tough time in 8th grade or middle school. And so they need to kind of start their high school environment a little bit early. But we're a college prep school that makes college doable, or college prep doable, for students that might not even have college as an idea. It's just not on their radar because they do have a learning difference. They have ADHD, they have dyslexia, they have dyscalculia, they have their high functioning ASD, processing issues, or anxiety, depression, and school avoidance that's kept them, a year behind, that's kept them out of school, that's put them into some type of a program for a while, and then they need a place where they can come feel safe, feel supported. I'll talk about the college prep stuff in a minute, but I think really the heart of the school is our people. We really look at our teachers and our faculty and our admin as, here you are, you're really good at what you do. We're going to let you do it. But we really collaborate all the time to discuss our students. We meet every Friday afternoons, and we literally case manage our kids. We go through, how are they doing academically? And if the math teacher says, I'm having trouble with this student, well, the English teacher might say, well, try this. Or if one of the admins says, believe it or not, so-and-so's cat died. Well, that's tough. Or they break up with their first love, or a grandparent dies, or gosh forbid, parents get divorced. We don't try to delve into their personal lives, but it's kind of, it's very holistic, which is a very kind of, catchy word, but it really is. There are kids. I think Chris would always say that we're their parents during the day. And we really are. But let me go back to the college prep, because what it does is, what's always really hurt my feelings is I'll get students that'll come in a lot of the time, sophomore, junior year, where they've been told by counselors, you're not going to, you're on community college track, or you're on a vocational track. And I'm not going to say that college is for everyone. We see how expensive college is now. We see that students are going to college with no idea of what they want to do. We see that students are going to college and graduating and can't find jobs. So I'm not here to push college, but I am here to say that if you have a learning difference, college is possible. There's lots of things that are possible. And so with our classes, no class is larger than 10. Average class right now is probably about 6. So for college prep, they get a ton of attention in class. They do not go home with 3 hours of homework at night. They go home with maybe an hour, because working with 6 students is very different than working with 30. Because what we really believe is that family time is as important as academics. And also with that family time is pursuing passions, being able to do something outside of school that you love, be it running, be it playing the violin, be it a sports team, be it any of those things. Having that time to do it. And also, honestly, again, time with your family. family, because high school is usually the last 4 years that kiddos, well, I guess parents cross your fingers that your kiddos are home. Some are home till they're 30 these days, but it's really that time of, be able to have dinner with your family. I had a young lady not very long ago who came from public school who was in this AP track, and it was killing her. I mean, we get a lot of students, anxiety, depression, and it's, I'm taking 5 APs, but I'm not going to school. Well, why are you taking 5 APs? There's a college for
Right.
you. You don't
Right.
need 5 APs. So, but again, just really meeting the kids where they are.
No, that go ahead. I'm just saying that's a wonderful description of Palo Alto Prep, and I can confirm with all the clients I've sent there over the years and how well they've done that you guys do a marvelous job. But let me ask you this, and I ask this of all specialty schools, right? Either non-public schools or private, because it helps me to serve my clientele, and that is, what would you say is your wheelhouse kid, the kid that that comes with a set of characteristics that you do almost every single time you hit a home run, right? Or this kid does very well in that environment. And then what are the kids that you stretch out to include, because you guys are so good? You're small classes. There's a lot of kids that do well in that setting, right? So, kids that are higher functioning on the spectrum, do you branch out into that group? And how much will you deal with some behaviors, right? We see a lot of behaviors in school age kids, even in high school. And how much of that will you take on, right, and support, because you see everything else in that child will be successful at Palo Alto Prep? Give our listeners a sense of your wheelhouse kid, and then the kids that you will also take on that do well in that setting.
I'll tell you, number one for wheelhouse kid is a family that's supportive. Parents that want to work with us, school child. That collaboration, if we don't have that, be it private, be it non-public school, it doesn't work. Never works. If we have to fight the parents, we've told stories. Chris has told stories for years about, parents and kids banding together against us. So if something does happen at school and we need to work with a student, if the kid goes home and the parents side with the student without even having a conversation with us, not going to work. We joke that we've suspended or expelled more parents than students. And we've done that. We've taken private pay parents and said, here's your money, go find someplace else. So again, that collaboration with family. The gamut is pretty wide. We're part of an LD group of about 15 schools on the peninsula and North Bay, and everybody wants to say, what is your place? We really run the gamut. Learning difference wise, it's dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, ADHD. Again, like you said, high functioning ASD. A student, very definitely verbal, but a student, I'm finding more and more that students are being diagnosed with ASD in their junior year. Working with these kids, you can kind of see it. But, parents are sometimes surprised. So that's kind of, that autism spectrum thing really is a spectrum. But also we have students, private pay, that just have always been in a small school and they like a small school. We have some 2E kids who are taking calculus and barely doing 9th grade English. It's that combination. So really a very wide spectrum. But we never take a student that doesn't want to be here. And that probably applies more to the non-public school side, never, ever. But our range is pretty large. Like I said, we have private pay students that do not have learning differences. And we have a couple students who actually are not on the college prep path. They're modified. But they're kiddos that being here, it's safe. They're absolutely exploding social emotionally. They're making friends. They were bullied. There was something going on that they just needed that warm, supportive environment. I'll get to who we don't work with in a minute, but I want to talk about that environment again, because for those kids, we've got 6 dogs on campus. We're kind of known as the school with dogs. And I know that sounds like we're a dog pound, but we're not. They're in classrooms with the exception of 2 German Shepherds we have up front. But they're in classrooms, and it is amazing what a dog does for a kiddo that's anxiety, depression. We work amazingly well with school refusal, anxiety, depression, and unfortunately suicidal ideation kids. When I say suicidal ideation, they need to be in treatment. They need to have, worked on whatever issues are going on. But those kiddos that just don't feel comfortable coming to school, I will have students that will come in an interview and have not gone to school in 3 months, 6 months, a year. And I'll say to them, you don't have to go to class the first day, just get in the building. And they'll look at me and no, I'm serious. You don't have to go to class the first week, just get in the building. And, you can sit in a room on your phone and listen to music. Wait, no, you're not going to let me do that. No. Just glitched. You can draw, and what happens with that is they get bored, so after a day, after an hour, after whatever, we move them in. And I have a couple teachers. One is our art teacher, who's amazing, that they just go into their classroom for a little bit of time. And it's just a slow process. Brittany, our vice principal, spends lots of times, and let me just say, we're not a therapeutic school. We're not a behavior school. But we work well with anxiety, depression. And I was saying, Brittany goes out and pulls kids out of cars. When I say pulls, she goes out with the dog and will talk to a parent and child and get the child to come in. Right. The students we don't do well with are externalizing behavior. We do not do well with those students. We do have 3 therapists on staff that probably 85% of our students see once a week. And they're here if we need for some reason. We have no bullies on campus. But I'd say kids that externalize behavior, kids that are doing any type of drugs, and then students on the spectrum that are not high functioning, that are disruptive, those students, it doesn't work in this environment. And again, it's because we just have such a mixture. But it's interesting, because when we interview a student, sometimes initially we're like, oh, I don't know. And then we have them shadow, and immediately they bond with somebody here, or the teachers go, maybe you thought they were a little too not in our bandwidth, but yeah, they are. And by the same token, we'll get a student that we're like, oh my gosh, they're totally in our bandwidth, and they'll shadow and we'll go, oh, maybe not a fit. Our admissions process is very simple. It really is a meeting with Brittany, our vice principal, and Chris, the executive director. And then it's a shadow day. We don't do any assessments. Well, I should take that back. We ask for a writing sample, and we do give them a little bit of a math sample, but it's no big pressure. Then we'll speak to a therapist, a psychologist, somebody, teacher, and get a feel for where they are academically.
Great.
Am I answering your question?
Yes, very much so. And, I just want to interject a little bit on the dog piece and how important that is, right? We overlooked that. And years ago, I had a few service animal and dogs in this instance in high schools, and I was able to drive the ability for a student or a number of students to bring their service animal into the high school with them. And it is at that moment, because I saw how well that worked, not just with those kids, by the way, not just with the kids but with everybody in their sphere. It was just a very open, accepted scenario in high schools that nobody thought would be open and accepted. And it was at that time, many, many years ago, when I thought, you know what, I can envision a bit of a pound on every high school campus, right? Where they're just a place to put your dogs if it isn't, right? Very safe, where kids can even go and pet the animals, but otherwise they would be circulating with their students. And that has not happened. And I've always felt that was unfortunate, because there's something we see so much anxiety. You see it, of course, and you've mentioned it a number of times, right? What a safe environment means to students and their learning. And of course, from my clientele, we probably have more high anxiety and depression clients right now than we've ever seen, right? A mix of social media and COVID. This idea that COVID's gone is just not reality. We're still seeing, right, the signs that it was here, even though it's 5 years ago. We see that anxiety we see across the board, from young kids to high schoolers, is still very much there. So I love the dog aspect. I love that kids can come in and have that connection and feel instantly comfortable, because that's an important place for them to be if they're going to learn. If they're constantly looking over their shoulder at the next bully who's approaching, or they can hardly get themselves to school because they're so anxious about everything that's going on, a service dog can really help. So I'm very high on that piece of Palo Alto Prep. It is not a small thing to be overlooked. It is something we should be seeing in many more environments than we see today, in my mind.
I totally agree with you. And we've had students actually that have service dogs. And that's been really interesting because of the dogs we have don't roam, except, like I said, I've got an older German Shepherd who roams. He's our old man. But the service dogs are right under the desk. They don't make a peep. Students learn that you're not to touch a service dog when they're in service. But with a few of the dogs we have, there's in the art classroom, in the English classroom, our director of special education has a dog in his classroom. And the kiddos Brittany, our vice principal, has 2 dogs in her office. They'll say, "Can I go sit with a dog?" And literally, I think it cuts the time in half that a student would come out of class. And it just gives them that sense of calmness. And, I always say older people and kids need to have dogs. I didn't grow up with dogs, but, I'm growing up with dogs now, and I absolutely adore it. Your piece about bullying, I really want to touch on, because we look at bullying as, not the traditional, clearly, no one's out in the parking lot fighting, but also microaggressions. I mean, rolling your eyes in a class when somebody asks a question is bullying. For years, one of my favorite analogies that just made me sad was when you're in kindergarten and the teacher asks what's 1 + 1, everybody's like, me, 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 me. And the student will go, 4. And everybody will go, yay. And the teacher will go, no, it's 2. When you get to about 5th grade and you raise your hand and you answer wrong, people will go, oh God, him again. Right. And then by the time kids get to high school, those students that maybe had a learning difference, maybe had been bullied, they're the kiddos that are in the back of the classroom. They're not saying a word. They're not making a peep. They're not behavior issues, but they're not learning. And so we really we spend our first couple of days of school every year really talking about bullying, talking about acceptance, talking about being accepting, for LBGQT. I always get the thing wrong, but about those students. We do have a population of students that identify as non-gender or other gender, or just really accepting kids where they are and who they are. But we spend a lot of time doing that. We do a field trip every year that traces the civil rights movement to the Deep South. Years ago, when John Lewis was alive, he still would come meet with the kids for a half a day. But literally, they go through the entire civil rights movement. It's incredibly moving. It's incredibly tearful. And kids come back changed. And even, I kind of look at it now because so much has changed in those 50 years maybe, but it hasn't, because the same things that were going on then are still going on now in different forms or in the same form. And so kiddos come home so much more understanding. And, I go back to ASD. I mean, I've had quite a few students on the spectrum come back, and even though naturally they might not have been emotional, it really touched them and they're able to talk about it. I would like to touch on for a second, if you don't mind, back to the experiential learning piece, because I think one of the things that sets us apart is kind of our electives and also the things we do outside of school. So like I mentioned, we do Sojourn to the Past. For years, we've done an international trip. Tied to our international trip and our field trips these days is a program called Praxis, which is where students every Friday morning meet in groups for group projects. And it's challenging. So I come up with an idea that I want to do a podcast, let's say. And so I need to recruit someone that knows how to do the technical, someone that maybe wants to be the person talking, do the interviews, all of that. So I'm pulling people that have those skills, not necessarily my best friends. Now, inherent in that is I don't like so-and-so, or so-and-so is annoying, or so-and-so doesn't pull their weight. That's what it's all about. We tell a story about, we had a group of kids that were doing events on campus, and they were doing a barbecue, and they were so excited, and they got everything, and they put up the signs, and we're going to sell hamburgers, and we're going to do this. And one dad came to help barbecue. They get ready to barbecue, and the dad goes, "Where's the meat?" They didn't buy the meat. They had all the tomatoes and everything.
Right.
And so we said, okay, well, let's try it again tomorrow, right? And the dad was like, no, I'll go to the grocery store, I'll get it. Like, no. This is the learning experience. You need to fail. Years ago, someone said to me, fail forward. And you need to fail. And I think that that's something that's lost in our society right now. I think our kids with screens and with the internet and everything, they're not, unfortunately, doing a little bit of the hard knocks, and I think they need a little bit of that. But really quickly, so we do tons of different activities. Our Friday electives are things like sword fighting, hiking, climbing, all of that sorts of stuff, stained glass, lots of art, music. But we also have an aviation program. And I just heard on the news this morning that they have a huge shortage of aircraft controllers. We have a state-of-the-art simulator here where actually the students, it's not a video game, and I invite people to come see it, where we have pilots come in and keep current on their licenses on this simulator. They are talking to a dedicated air traffic controller. So they are learning, basically, it's a cockpit that they're learning how to fly a plane. And then they actually go up during the semester twice and fly a plane with a flight instructor. Now, it's a long down the road before they have a pilot's license. Mm-hmm. But we now, with our program, I think we're about 8 years in, we have 6 pilots. I just was so delighted to post on LinkedIn. I have a young man who just became a certified flight instructor. And that means he's gotten his commercial, he's gotten his private, he has all the certifications. And what's neat about that is, we've had students with pretty severe learning differences become scuba master divers, scuba, what do I want to say? Research divers, pilots. We have another student who had some pretty severe learning differences that is now a pilot. He's a private pilot, not a private. He's one of those corporate pilots. Mm-hmm. And one of the first times he flew, the air traffic controllers kind of tagged him when he landed because of the way he speaks. They thought he was drunk, and he wasn't. Just his learning difference, right? So it's just really interesting. It's fun, and
wonderful.
Come to the school with a flight program and dogs.
Right, exactly. No, well, I mean,
what school has a flight program and dogs, right?
Right. No, who wouldn't want to go to that school? And that is, but the wonderful thing about Palo Alto Prep, from my perspective, is you are more broad in the child you will accept. You're some of the schools out there, some very good ones. They're there to treat kids that are just have this, right? One thing. And that is sometimes very hard to get into, man. If you just have a little extra, right? If you're very high functioning, but you're on the spectrum, no, sorry, you're not a good fit. If if you've got too much anxiety, sorry, not a good fit. That's not our thing. And what I love about Palo Alto Prep, one of the many things is how you will branch out. And if I call and say, listen, maybe not your wheelhouse kid, but I think it's a good fit anyway, please, you guys will listen, right? You will listen to the parents. You'll listen to those who understand the child that does very well in your environment, right? Many kids do. And so if you're listening to this and you're in Northern California, if you're not in Northern California, look for a place in your environment that is like Palo Alto Prep if your child's not doing well in public school, because it's schools like that that really focus on what these kids need, support them in the way that you do, that drive meaningful progress in education. When the classic public school environment is too much, right? It's an overwhelming environment for many children. Yet we force them into that because we have few options. If there are options out there, learn about them, know them, and consider sending your kid to them, just like Palo Alto Prep. We only have a couple of minutes, Lisa, and I want to say a few words about this NPS versus private distinction, because I think that's important. I don't think I've said a lot about that issue in previous podcasts. So for the listener, an NPS stands for non-public school. It is a school that has gone through what we'll call a regulatory process in California with the California Department of Education to be what we call certified, certification from the state. And that is important because it allows school districts to contract directly with that school. If you're an NPS, you can contract directly with school districts, and they can place that school, like Palo Alto Prep, on an IEP as an offer of FAPE, right? There are many districts in the area that know Palo Alto Prep well, know the kid that they serve well, and if a student in their district is not doing particularly well and they think it's a good fit at Palo Alto Prep, they will literally refer that student, send a packet to Palo Alto Prep. And if Palo Alto Prep then does the shadow day that you described and accepts that student, the district will offer Palo Alto Prep on an IEP as an offer of FAPE, and then contract directly with Palo Alto Prep for that student to go to school there. That is the NPS certification pathway. Private schools that do not bother to get certified, and there are many good ones that don't go through that process, private pay, the parents pay, they contract with the parents, and then parents will very often in those settings use somebody like me to get the district to reimburse them. But here's the key, it's a reimbursement model. So if you find a school in your area that is not certified, but is a very good school for your student, it doesn't mean the district won't be involved in funding. It just means the district will not have a legal obligation, and no judge does either, right? A judge cannot order placement at a non-certified program. So if I have a kid, district says, no, I'm not sending them to Palo Alto Prep, and I go in and get a judge to say, yes, you're not serving him properly, he needs Palo Alto Prep to be successful, that judge can order placement there. If in a private school setting that is not a certified NPS, the judge cannot order placement there, only reimbursement. And that is a huge distinction, or at least a big legal distinction that parents should know about. If they're looking for a school and a perfect fit, and you have two equals in your mind, one certified and what isn't, pick the certified one, because the legal pathway and the district's pathway for contract is much easier in that setting. Now, I know you have very good reasons for private versus NPS that we don't need to get into now, but what I do need my parents to understand is that distinction can be important legally. And if you have further questions about that, again, TLO gives a free consult. Very happy to answer those questions if you call.
David,
right.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Please.
Promise it'll be quick.
Finish
I
this
just
up.
I just need to say this because I know my district partners are going to hear this.
Right.
The referrals need to come through a district. So I cannot have a parent come in and ask me to refer their district or refer our school to their district.
Right.
And so I just need to clarify, because the districts are our clients and our parents are our clients, and we work with both. And so I know that what you do, and I just need to clarify that. And I love my districts.
Right.
So I don't want them to think that I'm in here pushing for people.
No, I hope I know. No, of course not. And I hope I didn't.
Parents need to do what they need to do for their child. No, parents need to do that. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I know my district partners are probably going to see this.
Well, yes, they may very well, and I don't think I said anything I shouldn't have that will at all. No, and it's just that parents need to know that distinction.
Yes.
Your district partners already do.
Well,
right?
and a
It's the
placement,
parents that
and a
don't have this
placement,
information.
and it's a lot easier for a parent, I think, to get a placement in a non-public school than go the fighting route for reimbursement. But that's just my opinion. Sorry.
No question. That's why that's the advantage
So,
of being certified. No
yes,
question about it.
yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Lisa, I'm afraid we're out of time. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and telling us about Palo Alto Prep. It's always been one of my favorites, just because you guys do such a nice job. So keep it up, please. To your listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Very much appreciate your time. I hope you got something useful out of our conversation with Lisa. And with that, we hope to see you at the next episode of Special Education Essentials. I am your host, David Tollner, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Lisa.
You've been tuning in to the Special Education Essentials for Parents and Families podcast with your host, David Tollner. This podcast is not intended as legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please talk to your legal counsel about your own situation. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, tollnerlawoffices.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.